Look at this photograph. New York City, 1870. Magnificent buildings stretching toward the sky. Elaborate facades carved with impossible precision. Grand boulevards wide enough to accommodate thousands. Infrastructure designed for millions of people. But here's what they don't want you to notice. The streets are empty, completely empty. Not just quiet, not just underpopulated. Empty. As if the city was built yesterday and nobody came. As if someone constructed an entire metropolis and then forgot to fill it with people. Does that make any sense to you? Now look at Chicago. Same year, same architecture, same impossible grandeur, same empty streets. Look at San Francisco. Look at Boston. Look at Philadelphia. All of them. Cities designed for populations they wouldn't reach for another 50 years. Some of them wouldn't reach their designed capacity for a century, but the buildings were already there. The infrastructure was already there. The water systems capable of serving millions were already there. All of it. Already there. Waiting for people who didn't exist yet. The official story says these cities grew naturally, that they expanded as populations increased, that infrastructure followed demand. But photographs don't lie, and the photographs show us something impossible. They show us fully formed cities standing empty. They show us architectural masterpieces with no inhabitants. They show us a world that was built for a civilization that wasn't there. So let me ask you something. When you build a house, do you build it 3 times larger than you need and then wait 50 years for your family to grow into it? When you construct a bridge, do you make it strong enough for traffic that won't exist for generations? No, you don't. Because that would be insane. That would be a catastrophic waste of resources. That would bankrupt any society stupid enough to attempt it. Yet that's exactly what we're told happened in every major city across America, across Europe, across the world, simultaneously, in the same architectural style, with the same impossible precision, with the same mysterious emptiness, all at once, all together, all according to a plan that supposedly didn't exist. Let's talk about construction capabilities. The official timeline tells us that in the 1800s, workers used primitive tools, horse-drawn carts, manual labor, basic pulleys and ropes. With these tools, we're told, they constructed buildings that modern engineers struggle to replicate. Buildings with foundations going down 100 feet. Buildings with stone blocks weighing dozens of tons each. Buildings with internal ventilation systems so sophisticated we still don't fully understand them. Buildings with acoustic properties that seem to defy the laws of physics. Buildings with electrical systems integrated into their very structure. And they did all this while the streets remained empty, while the populations remained small, while the economic justification for such construction simply didn't exist. Paris. The Great Exposition of 1889. The Eiffel Tower rises above the city. Magnificent. Impossible. Built in just 2 years, we're told, with primitive tools, by workers who supposedly had never constructed anything like it before. And around it, buildings of equal impossibility. The Grand Palais, the Petit Palais. Structures of glass and iron that shouldn't exist in that era. Shouldn't be possible with that technology. Shouldn't make any economic sense in a city that was supposedly still developing. But there they stand, in photographs, empty boulevards surrounding them, as if the city was a stage set, as if someone built a prop, as if the whole thing was constructed for an audience that never arrived. Look at the windows. This is what they never want you to examine closely. In building after building, across city after city, you'll find the same impossible detail. Windows on the ground floor that are actually on the second floor. The first floor is buried, completely underground, with staircases that now descend into basements that were clearly once grand entrances. Why would anyone design a building with its main entrance underground? They wouldn't, unless the ground level changed, unless something covered the original streets. Unless the world you see today is built on top of another world that came before. St. Petersburg. Beneath the modern street level, entire floors remain buried. In some buildings, you can still see the tops of windows peeking above the pavement. Windows to rooms that are now basements. Rooms that were clearly designed to have natural light. Rooms with ornate ceilings and elaborate moldings. Rooms that were meant to be seen, not buried. Moscow shows the same phenomenon. London, Rome, Constantinople. Every old city on Earth demonstrates this same impossible architecture. Buildings designed for a street level that no longer exists. Infrastructure planned for a world that's now buried under tons of dirt and rubble. The official explanation is cultural layer. They tell us that cities naturally accumulate debris over centuries, that streets slowly rise as civilizations build upon their own ruins. But look at the timeline. Many of these cities show 10 to 15 feet of accumulation in less than 100 years. That's not natural accumulation. That's not gradual cultural layering. That's a catastrophic burial. That's something covering these cities rapidly and completely. Something that happened all at once. Examine the doorways. In Tartarian structures across the world, you'll find doors that are enormous. Not just tall, not just wide, enormous. Doors 20 feet high. Doors that would require a giant to use comfortably. The official story calls them ceremonial. They say these doors were designed to impress, to create a sense of grandeur. But look at how many there are. Look at how common they are. Every building has them. Every entrance features them. These aren't ceremonial doors, these are functional doors, designed for daily use by people who were much, much larger than us. And the ceilings. Walk into any old government building, any old bank, any old library from the Tartarian period, and look up. The ceilings are absurdly high, 30 feet, 40 feet, sometimes more, with elaborate ventilation systems built into their structure, with acoustic properties that allow whispers to carry across vast spaces, with lighting systems that seem to distribute natural light in ways our modern buildings cannot replicate. Why would anyone build this way if the space was meant for normal-sized humans? Why waste resources on volume you don't need? Unless the people who designed these buildings weren't normal-sized, unless they had different needs, different proportions, different technologies. The train stations tell an even stranger story. Grand Central Terminal in New York, opened in 1913, designed to handle 500,000 people per day. But in 1913, New York's entire population was less than 5 million. The daily commuter population was a tiny fraction of that. So why build a terminal with capacity for numbers that wouldn't materialize for decades? The official answer is ambitious planning. Visionary architects anticipating future growth. But look at the photographs from opening day. The terminal is magnificent, perfect, complete in every detail, and almost empty. As if it was built for a rush hour that never came. As if someone constructed it for a population that had already vanished. Look at the urban planning. The street grids of old cities follow patterns that make no sense for organic growth. They're too perfect, too geometric, too precisely aligned with cardinal directions and astronomical phenomena. Washington, D.C., designed with perfect radiating avenues, with monuments placed at specific geometric points, with sightlines that align with solstices and equinoxes. We're told this was the work of Pierre l'Enfant in the 1790s. A single man designing an entire capital city from scratch, with mathematical precision that would require extensive surveying equipment and years of calculation. Equipment and time he didn't have. Yet the city emerged fully planned, as if someone was following a blueprint that already existed. St. Petersburg, founded in 1703. Within 20 years, it's a magnificent capital with palaces and cathedrals that rival anything in Europe. But Russia in 1703 was barely out of the medieval period. The technology didn't exist. The skilled labor didn't exist. The economic capacity didn't exist. Yet Peter the Great supposedly forced this city into existence through sheer will. Tens of thousands of workers dying in the marshes, building at impossible speed, creating architectural masterpieces with tools that shouldn't have been capable of such precision. And when you look at the early maps, something becomes clear. The city appears fully formed, not growing organically from a center, but emerging complete, as if it was rebuilt rather than built. The World Fairs reveal the deepest mystery. Chicago, 1893, the world's Columbian Exposition. Hundreds of buildings constructed in just 2 years. Magnificent structures of white plaster and fiber, covering more than 600 acres, with electrical systems, water features, transportation networks. All temporary, they tell us, all built to be torn down after the fair ended. But look at the photographs. These aren't temporary structures. These are solid buildings with foundations and infrastructure meant to last centuries, with architectural details that would take years to carve and install, with scale that defies the official timeline. 2 years. To create what appears to be an entire civilization, and then to destroy it all. Paris, 1900. The Exposition Universelle. Even larger, even more magnificent. Palaces of glass and iron, electrical lighting throughout, moving sidewalks, escalators. All technology that supposedly barely existed, all constructed in impossible timeframes, all documented in photographs that show completed structures where official records claim construction was still underway, and then destroyed, deliberately demolished. Why build such magnificence only to tear it down? Unless these weren't new constructions, unless they were remnants, unless the fairs were excuses to occupy and then destroy evidence of something that came before. Look at what happened after each exposition. Great fires. In Chicago, just months before the 1893 fair, a massive fire destroyed large portions of the old city, clearing the ground for new construction, we're told. But the fire started in multiple locations simultaneously, burned with impossible intensity, destroyed mostly old buildings while leaving newer structures intact, as if something was being deliberately erased. The pattern repeats. San Francisco, 1906, the earthquake and fire. Destroying old records, old architecture, old evidence. Baltimore, 1904. Great fire consuming the historic center. Seattle, 1889. Boston, 1872. Fire after fire after fire. Always targeting the oldest parts of cities. Always destroying archives and records. Always clearing the way for new construction that follows suspiciously similar architectural patterns. The orphan trains present another impossibility. Between 1854 and 1929, more than 200,000 children were transported from East Coast cities to the American West. The official story calls this a charitable program, relocating orphans from overcrowded cities to families in rural areas. But examine the numbers. 200,000 children. Where did they come from? New York's population in 1854 was barely 600,000. Even accounting for immigration, the number of orphans doesn't make sense. Unless something else happened. Unless there was a massive population displacement. Unless children survived something their parents didn't. The photographs of these orphan trains show something disturbing. The children are well-dressed, clean, organized. They don't look like street urchins. They look like they came from wealth, from education, from civilization. But they have no parents, no records, no documented origins in many cases. They're just there, suddenly, in massive numbers, needing to be redistributed across a continent, as if a population vanished and left only children behind, as if something removed the adults and spared the young. Census data from the 1800s reveals more anomalies. Cities that supposedly had small populations suddenly show massive increases, not gradual growth, sudden jumps. Chicago in 1840 had a population of about 4,000. By 1870, it claimed over 300,000. That's not normal growth. That's not even possible with immigration rates of that era. That's a city being repopulated, being filled with new inhabitants, as if the infrastructure was already there, waiting for people to arrive and occupy it. Now look at the technology they found in these buildings. Heating systems built into the walls, not radiators added later, built into the structure itself, using principles of thermodynamics that weren't officially understood until the late 1800s. Ventilation systems that move air without visible mechanisms, without pumps or fans, just flowing naturally through channels built into the architecture. Water systems that deliver fresh water to upper floors without the water pressure technology supposedly required. All of it integrated, all of it part of the original design, all of it demonstrating knowledge that the official timeline says didn't exist yet. The electrical systems are even more mysterious. Buildings from the Tartarian period feature metal rods and ornate metal decorations throughout their structure. We're told these are purely aesthetic, but examine their placement. They're positioned at specific geometric points, connected through the building's framework, aligned with the elaborate rooftop structures that official history dismisses as decoration. These buildings were receivers, conductors, part of a wireless power distribution system that modern engineers are only now beginning to understand was possible. Tesla demonstrated this technology. But the Tartarian builders had already implemented it on a global scale. The resonant properties of these structures suggest even more advanced knowledge. Concert halls with acoustics that modern architects cannot replicate despite computer modeling and advanced materials. Buildings where you can whisper at one end and be heard clearly at the other. Structures that seem to amplify certain frequencies while dampening others. This isn't accidental. This is intentional design. Engineering based on understanding of harmonic resonance and wave physics that supposedly wasn't discovered until much later. Unless it wasn't discovered. Unless it was remembered. Unless someone was trying to rebuild technology they once had, but no longer fully understood. The maps tell a story that destroys everything you were taught. Pull up any world map from before 1850 and look at the northern regions. You'll see something that's been erased from modern consciousness. Tartary. Not a small region, not a minor territory. A massive empire spanning from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean, from the Arctic to the borders of China and Persia. The largest continuous landmass of civilization on any map, marked clearly, labeled explicitly. Divided into Chinese Tartary, Muscovite Tartary, independent Tartary. An empire so vast it dwarfed anything in Europe, and then it vanishes. Completely. By 1900, every reference is gone, every map redrawn. Every mention scrubbed from official records. An empire containing potentially hundreds of millions of people just disappears from history. Does that seem possible? Does that seem like something that could happen naturally? The explanation they give you is pathetic. They say Tartary was just a vague term Europeans used for lands they didn't understand, a catch-all name for various tribal peoples and minor kingdoms. But look at the maps more carefully. They show cities. Detailed cities with names and locations. They show borders, political divisions, trade routes. This isn't vague terminology. This is documented civilization. This is infrastructure and organization on a massive scale. And it's all being dismissed as a cartographic error. As if every map maker for 300 years made the same mistake. As if every explorer, every merchant, every diplomat who traveled these regions was confused about what they were seeing. The architectural evidence proves they're lying. From Moscow to Vladivostok, from Kazakhstan to Mongolia, you find the same building style, the same impossible precision, the same massive scale. Star forts with geometric perfection that would require aerial surveying. Cathedrals with acoustic engineering that modern science struggles to explain. Administrative buildings with heating and ventilation systems built into their walls. All of it connected. All of it following the same design principles. All of it suggesting a unified civilization with advanced technical knowledge. But we're told these were built by different peoples at different times for different purposes. We're told the similarity is coincidence. We're told not to see the pattern that's right in front of us. The star forts deserve special attention because they expose the entire deception. These structures exist on every continent, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Perfect geometric shapes, Precise angles. Walls designed with mathematical precision to deflect cannon fire. But here's what they never explain. These forts appear in places that had no military conflicts, in locations where the official history records no wars, built to defend against enemies that supposedly never existed, and they all follow the same design, whether in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, or even parts of Africa. The exact same geometric principles, the exact same construction techniques, the exact same scale and proportion, as if they were built by the same civilization, according to the same master plan, for the same purpose. The purpose wasn't defense. Look at their locations. Many star forts are positioned at key points in what appears to be a global grid, aligned with each other across vast distances, positioned at latitudes and longitudes that suggest geometric knowledge of the entire planet. They're not random military installations. They're nodes, part of a network, a system that spanned the globe. But a system for what? The official history has no answer because acknowledging the question destroys their entire narrative. It reveals that someone had global-level coordination, global-level planning, global-level technology, in an era when we're told such things were impossible. Now examine what happened to the knowledge. The Library of Alexandria, burned. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, destroyed. The Imperial Library of Constantinople, lost in flames. The Maya codices, almost entirely burned by Spanish conquistadors. The Library of Nalanda in India, razed. Over and over throughout history, we see the same pattern. Massive repositories of knowledge deliberately destroyed. But destroyed by whom? And why? The official story blames religious fanatics, invading armies, accidents. But look at the timing. Look at what else was happening when these burnings occurred. Look at what came after. New official histories, new timelines, new narratives that conveniently had no competing sources to contradict them. The book burnings didn't stop in ancient times. In the 1800s and early 1900s, libraries across Europe and America experienced mysterious fires. Always the rare book section, always the archives, always the materials that predated the official timeline. San Francisco, 1906. The earthquake destroyed the city. But what really burned were the records, the land deeds, the historical documents, the evidence of who owned what and when. Baltimore, 1904. The Great Fire specifically targeted the business district where records were kept. Chicago, 1871. The fire started at multiple points, burned with impossible heat, destroyed city records going back to the founding. Every time, official history blames accident or natural disaster. Every time, the result is the same. Evidence erased, contradictory records eliminated, official narratives left unchallenged. Look at what they did to the Tartarian cities that survived. They renovated them, modernized them. But renovation is a strange word for what actually happened. They removed the atmospheric electrical systems, ripped out the harmonic resonance features, destroyed the rooftop antennas disguised as ornamental spires, buried the lower floors, covered the evidence. Added modern plumbing and electrical systems because the occupants no longer understood how to use the original infrastructure. The buildings were designed to receive power wirelessly from the atmosphere. But the new inhabitants didn't have that technology, didn't understand it. So they ran wires, installed generators, covered the elegant solutions with crude retrofits. The cathedrals reveal the clearest evidence of lost function. These weren't just religious buildings. Examine their structure. The tall spires are antennas. The ornate metal decorations are conductors. The stained glass windows are positioned to interact with specific light frequencies. The internal geometry creates acoustic resonance at precise wavelengths. The buildings are receivers and transmitters, part of a global wireless energy system. The organs weren't just musical instruments. They were devices that generated specific frequencies. The Gothic architecture with its pointed arches and ribbed vaults wasn't aesthetic choice. It was functional design, creating spaces that amplified and channeled energy in ways we're only now beginning to understand. But the new occupants didn't know this. They saw beautiful buildings and assumed they were purely ceremonial. They maintained the structures without understanding their purpose. They rang the bells not knowing the bells were calibrated to specific harmonic frequencies. They sang hymns not realizing the music was designed to activate the building's energetic properties. The function was lost. Only the form remained. And over time, even the form was altered, modernized, updated, until almost nothing of the original system remained intact. The timeline they give us for industrialization makes no sense when you see the evidence. They tell us that steam power revolutionized manufacturing in the late 1700s, that factories gradually grew throughout the 1800s, that industrial capacity expanded slowly as technology improved. But the photographs show something different. They show massive factories already existing in the early 1800s. Enormous manufacturing facilities with capabilities that shouldn't exist yet. Built with precision that shouldn't be possible. Operating at scales that couldn't be economically justified by the populations of that era. As if the industrial capacity came first. As if someone inherited the factories and then figured out what to do with them. The railroad expansion follows the same impossible pattern. The official history says railroads were built gradually, expanding westward across America as the frontier opened. Track laid by armies of workers with primitive tools. Tunnels dug through mountains by hand. Bridges constructed across impossible gorges using nothing but human labor and simple machinery. But look at the construction rates. Look at the timeline. The Transcontinental Railroad completed in just 6 years. Through mountain ranges, across deserts, over terrain that modern engineers admit would take decades to traverse with current technology. And they did it all while fighting Indian wars, while establishing new towns, while supposedly building civilization from scratch in an empty wilderness. Except the wilderness wasn't empty. The photographs prove it. When the railroads reached certain locations, they found buildings already there. Towns that appeared on no maps. Infrastructure that predated American expansion. The official story calls these ghost towns, mining camps that boomed and busted. But examine them closely. Many of these structures are Tartarian architecture, built with the same techniques as the great cities of Europe, with the same impossible precision, with the same evidence of advanced engineering. They weren't built by prospectors and miners, they were already there. Remnants of something that came before. And the railroad expansion was actually a reoccupation, a claiming of infrastructure that already existed. The Native American legends tell a different story than what you learned in school. Many tribes speak of people who came before. Tall people, builder people, people who created the great mounds and earthworks that still exist across North America. The official archaeology dismisses these as primitive structures. Simple burial mounds created by Stone Age peoples. But look at what they actually are. Geometric shapes of massive scale, aligned with astronomical phenomena, built with mathematical precision that suggests advanced surveying. Some of them are shaped like animals visible only from the air. In an era when we're told flight didn't exist. Created for a purpose we don't understand by people the official history says were primitive. Unless they weren't primitive. Unless they were remnants of something greater. Unless what we call Native Americans were themselves survivors of the same catastrophe that destroyed Tartary. The mudflood evidence appears everywhere once you know to look for it. Dig anywhere in an old city and you'll find it. Layers of compressed mud, filled with debris, containing artifacts from the same time period at different depths, as if everything was buried at once, not gradually over centuries. But suddenly, catastrophically. Geologists call these layers flood deposits, but they refuse to discuss the implications. Refuse to acknowledge that flood deposits covering entire cities suggest floods of impossible scale. Not local disasters, global catastrophe. Something that could bury the first floors of buildings across multiple continents simultaneously. The eyewitness accounts from the 1800s describe strange atmospheric phenomena that match no modern experience. Colored rains, Days of darkness. Unusual aurora displays far from polar regions. Atmospheric electricity so intense it killed animals and started fires. These accounts appear in newspapers and journals from around the world, all describing similar phenomena, all occurring in roughly the same period. The official explanation blames volcanic eruptions, industrial pollution, primitive observers misunderstanding natural phenomena. But read the accounts themselves. These are educated observers, scientists, military officers, government officials, describing things they'd never seen before, things that terrified them, things that suggested the world was ending. The population statistics reveal something impossible that demographers refuse to discuss. The world population in 1800 is estimated at about 1 billion. By 1900, it supposedly reached 1.6 billion. But examine the growth rates in specific regions. Some areas show massive population increases that cannot be explained by birth rates or immigration. Other regions show mysterious declines. Entire areas that were densely populated suddenly become nearly empty. The official history attributes this to migration, to industrialization drawing people to cities. But the numbers don't work. The math doesn't support the narrative, unless there was a population replacement. Unless the world was being repopulated after something removed a significant portion of humanity. The invention timeline presents another series of impossibilities. We're told that most modern technology was invented in a 60-year span. Photography, telegraphy, radio, telephone, electric lighting, automobiles, airplanes, all emerging between 1850 and 1910. 60 years of innovation that supposedly dwarfed all previous human achievement. But look at how these technologies appeared. Not through gradual development, not through incremental improvement, but suddenly, fully formed. As if someone was rediscovering rather than inventing. As if the knowledge already existed somewhere and was being recovered. Tesla didn't invent wireless energy transmission. He demonstrated it, proved it could work. But his patents show systems that seem to reference prior art that officially doesn't exist, as if he was rebuilding something he'd seen or studied, something from before. The world wars take on new significance when you understand what was really happening. World War I destroyed the last remnants of the old European order, the empires that might have held knowledge of what came before, the aristocratic families who might have preserved forbidden history. The war shattered them. And in the chaos, borders were redrawn, countries renamed, histories rewritten. The Russian Revolution specifically targeted the nobility and the church. The keepers of records and knowledge, millions killed, libraries burned, archives destroyed. And from the ashes, a new state emerged with a new history. A history that conveniently erased Tartary, that denied the empire had ever existed, that rewrote everything that came before. World War II continued the erasure. The bombing campaigns didn't just target military objectives. They destroyed old cities, ancient architecture, historical centers. Dresden wasn't a military target. It was a cultural center, filled with Tartarian buildings and archives, firebombed into oblivion. Hamburg, Berlin, Tokyo, dozens of cities across Europe and Asia. The places where evidence might have survived, where records might have been kept, systematically destroyed. And after the war, reconstruction, modernization, building new cities on the ruins of the old, erasing what remained, creating a world where the past could be whatever the victors decided to write in the history books. The photographs from before the wars show something they don't want you to see. Cities filled with magnificent architecture, but strangely depopulated, as if the buildings were maintained but not fully utilized, as if humanity was living in spaces designed for far more people. The photographs from after the wars show the same cities destroyed and then rebuilt, but rebuilt differently, smaller, simpler, with modern materials and modern techniques. The elegance lost, the precision gone. The new world couldn't recreate what the old world had, could only mimic it poorly, could only build shadows of what existed before. You live in those shadows now, walking streets that were once buried deeper underground, working in buildings whose original purpose is forgotten, using technology that's a crude approximation of what existed before. You've been taught that you're living in the most advanced civilization in human history, that everything before you was primitive. That progress is linear and always upward. But look around with clear eyes. Look at what you cannot build. Look at what you cannot explain. Look at the impossible architecture that surrounds you in every old city. Architecture that your civilization could not create, could not even fully understand. You are not living at the peak of human achievement. You are living in the recovery period, in the aftermath, in the shadow of a civilization so advanced that even its ruins surpass your greatest accomplishments. The evidence is everywhere, in every buried floor, in every oversized door, in every geometric star fort, in every impossible cathedral, in every map that shows what's been erased, in every photograph of empty cities designed for millions, in every invention that appeared too suddenly, in every fire that destroyed records, in every war that erased the past. The pattern is undeniable once you see it, overwhelming once you accept it, terrifying once you understand what it means. Someone built a global civilization, someone who understood energy and resonance and harmonic principles we're only now rediscovering. Someone who could coordinate construction across continents, who could create cities designed to last millennia, who could integrate technology so elegantly into architecture that we mistake it for decoration. And then something destroyed them, something catastrophic, something that buried their cities, that removed their population, that left only fragments and survivors. Survivors who didn't understand what they'd inherited, who couldn't maintain the systems, who gradually lost the knowledge, who eventually forgot there had ever been anything greater. And now you're told to forget too, to accept the simple narrative, to believe that everything you see was built by people just like you, using tools just like yours, for purposes just like what you'd choose. But you know better now. You've seen the evidence. You've followed the pattern. You understand that the official story is a lie designed to keep you from asking the real questions. Questions like, what happened to them? What was the catastrophe? Could it happen again? And most important, what else are they hiding? The cities stand empty in old photographs not because they were waiting for people to arrive, but because the people had already gone, vanished, removed, leaving behind monuments to a civilization we can barely comprehend. We are not the builders. We are the scavengers, living among ruins we don't understand, in a world that was designed for someone else, by someone else, for purposes we've forgotten, and those who control the narrative desperately need you to keep forgetting. Because the moment you remember, the moment you see clearly what's been hidden, their entire structure of control collapses. Their authority evaporates. Their version of history becomes the obvious fiction it always was. The truth is buried, sometimes literally beneath your feet, sometimes in archives they hope you'll never read, sometimes in photographs they wish didn't exist. But it's there, waiting, just like those cities were waiting, empty but not abandoned, silent but not forgotten. Ready for the moment when someone finally asks the right questions, when someone finally connects all the pieces, when someone finally sees the whole picture instead of the fragments they've been allowed to glimpse. That moment is now. You are seeing it, and you cannot unsee it. Welcome to the real history. Welcome to the hidden world. Welcome to the truth they never wanted you to discover.